Hello and welcome back to Hollywood Unveiled. We're the place you come to when you want to look beyond the Klieg lights and the red carpets to understand the machinery, the magic, and sometimes the madness that fuels the dream factory. Today, we're not just peeking behind the curtain. We're tumbling headfirst down a rabbit hole that leads to one of Hollywood's most curious and, in many ways, cautionary tales. We're zeroing in on Kristine DeBell, an actress whose early, audacious choice cast a shadow so long it arguably reshaped her entire career trajectory. The central question we're grappling with is as thorny as it is fascinating. When a young, effervescent talent makes a decision that catapults them into public consciousness for all the wrong reasons, is it a calculated risk that simply didn't pay off? Is it a stark example of youthful naivete exploited by a system always hungry for the next sensation? Or more disturbingly, is it a reflection of Hollywood's own duplicitous nature, an industry that often whispers promises of stardom while laying traps for the unwary? Let's pull back the layers. Alice Lost or Hollywood's deception? Cast your minds back, if you will, to the mid-1970s. America was a kaleidoscope of change, politically charged, socially turbulent, and culturally adventurous. The air was thick with the scent of rebellion, a questioning of old norms, and a burgeoning freedom that permeated everything, especially the arts. In this era of liberation and experimentation, Hollywood itself was undergoing a seismic shift. The old studio system was creaking, and a new wave of independent, often audacious filmmakers was emerging, eager to shatter conventions. And into this vibrant, volatile landscape steps Kristine DeBell. Before the film that would define her in so many ways, she was the epitome of fresh-faced American beauty, a successful Ford model. Being a Ford model in that era wasn't just about looking good in clothes. It signified a certain class, an aspiration, a kind of wholesome glamour that many saw as a direct pipeline to mainstream acting success. She graced magazine covers, her smile was infectious, her eyes full of promise. She was, by all accounts, on the cusp of something conventional. Then came the cinematic equivalent of a cultural grenade, Alice in Wonderland, an X-rated musical fantasy. Let that title sink in for a moment. Alice in Wonderland. The beloved, whimsical, almost sacred children's classic by Lewis Carroll now append an X-rated musical fantasy to it. The cognitive dissonance is immediate, isn't it? It's jarring, it's provocative, and in 1976, it was downright shocking. This wasn't some underground art house reimagining. This was a full-blown Technicolor song and dance musical with copious amounts of nudity and simulated sex. And who was the wide-eyed Alice navigating this psychedelic, sexually charged wonderland? None other than Kristine DeBell. The questions explode like fireworks. Why? Why would a promising young woman with a respectable modeling career and presumably mainstream aspirations attach herself to such a patently controversial, career-risking project? Was it a desperate gamble for fame, a belief that any publicity is good publicity? Or was she an unwitting pawn in a larger game, perhaps misled about the film's ultimate tone and content? A lamb led to a rather risque slaughter by filmmakers eager to exploit a famous title and a fresh face. Could it have been a deliberate, albeit naive, attempt to be part of something artistically daring? A misunderstanding of the shifting, treacherous sands of what was then termed porn chic? And the even bigger, more haunting question that this series, Hollywood Unveiled, exists to explore. What truly happened to Kristine DeBell after this X-rated plunge? Did this singular role, this one film, become an inescapable brand, a Scarlet X that Hollywood's gatekeepers would forever hold against her? The story of Kristine DeBell and her journey into this very adult wonderland is far more than just a piece of cult film trivia. It's a fascinating and frankly unsettling case study of ambition, exploitation, the often cruel caprice of fame, and the complex, contradictory moral codes of Hollywood. So, buckle up. We're about to explore the real cost of a trip to this wonderland and what it unveiled about the industry itself. When X became chic. To truly get our heads around Kristine DeBell's decision or the circumstances that led to it, we need to immerse ourselves deeply in the unique cultural miasma of the 1970s. This wasn't just a decade, it was a paradigm shift. The sexual revolution wasn't a polite debate. It was a full-throated roar against decades, if not centuries, of repression. It was messy. It was exhilarating for some, terrifying for others, and it undeniably changed the landscape of popular culture. And cinema, always a mirror and a shaper of society, was riding the crest of this wave, sometimes with grace, often with awkward, commercially driven abandon. The old gatekeepers of morality in film, like the archaic Hays Code, had crumbled. The MPAA rating system, introduced in 1968, was still relatively new, and its X rating was initially intended to simply denote adults only, not necessarily outright pornography. For a fleeting, fascinating period, this X rating acquired a strange, almost rebellious allure. Suddenly, films that would have been relegated to seedy, smoke-filled back rooms were bursting into the mainstream consciousness, sparking debate, drawing crowds, and crucially making astonishing amounts of money. We're talking about the phenomenon of porn chic. Think about Deep Throat 1972. It wasn't just a dirty movie. It became a cultural touchstone, whispered about at cocktail parties, attended by celebrities, even analyzed by some intellectuals as a sign of loosening inhibitions. Then came The Devil in Miss Jones 1973, another X-rated feature that achieved a surprising level of crossover success. These films, and others like them, weren't just financial anomalies. They signaled a moment where the forbidden became fashionable, where transgression itself was a selling point. The lines between exploitation, art, and commerce became incredibly, almost dangerously blurred. Why chic? Perhaps it was a collective sigh of relief after years of censorship, a voyeuristic curiosity, or even a misguided attempt by some to legitimize base desires by cloaking them in the language of liberation or art. Hollywood, the grand old dame of entertainment, was watching all of this with a mixture of fascination, bewilderment, and, let's be honest, a touch of avarice. The traditional studio system was feeling the heat from television and from a new breed of independent filmmakers who weren't afraid to take risks, often because they had less to lose and everything to gain. These indies saw the public's appetite for edgier content and rushed to fill the void, sometimes with genuinely artistic intent, often with a more cynical eye on the box office. European cinema, too, had long been pushing boundaries of sexual explicitness in art films, and those influences were trickling into American filmmaking. So, the environment was ripe for projects that defied easy categorization. Now, place Kristine DeBell, the Ford model with dreams of stardom, into this swirling vortex. How would a project like Alice in Wonderland, an X-rated musical fantasy, have been presented to her or perceived by her? It's plausible that the X-rated aspect was downplayed or spun as edgy and humorous, a satirical musical romp. The musical and fantasy elements tied to such an iconic title might have sounded like a quirky, attention-grabbing, and perhaps even legitimate way to make a memorable debut. Was she fully cognizant of how deeply the X would sear itself into her professional identity, distinguishing her from, say, an actress in a critically acclaimed but sexually frank European art film? Unlikely. The nuances of industry perception, A rarely taught in modeling school, the allure of a leading role cannot be overstated for an aspiring actress. The competition is, and always has been, ferocious. The chance to be Alice, even this Alice, could have seemed like a golden ticket, a shortcut past years of bit parts and chorus lines. Was it an artistic statement for its creators? Bill Osco, the director, was certainly no stranger to adult-themed productions. For him, it was likely a shrewd commercial calculation. Take a universally recognized public domain story, inject it with the titillation that was selling like hotcakes, add some catchy tunes, and cast an appealing fresh face. Was it art? Was it exploitation? For the audience, it was a curiosity. For the filmmakers, a business venture. For Kristine DeBell, it was the role of a lifetime's dice. In this era of shifting boundaries, where Federico Fellini was exploring grotesque sexuality in Satyricon, and Bernardo Bertolucci was shocking the world with Last Tango in Paris, one could almost squint and see how a project like Alice might have been rationalized by a young, ambitious actress as something more than just a skin flick. But the critical difference, the one Hollywood would seize upon, was the context and perhaps the perceived intent. Alice wasn't highbrow European art house. It was an American independent, X-rated musical comedy. And that distinction, as Kristine DeBell would soon discover, made all the difference in the eyes of the Hollywood establishment. The chic of porn chic was a very thin veneer, easily scratched away to reveal the industry's more puritanical, or at least image-conscious, underbelly. The Fateful Decision. So, the stage is set, a culture in flux, an industry in transition, and a young model with stars in her eyes. How exactly did Kristine DeBell find herself signing on the dotted line for Alice in Wonderland, an X-rated musical fantasy? This is where the narrative often relies on inference and the few retrospective comments DeBell has made, because the detailed moment-by-moment account of her decision-making process isn't widely publicized. But we can piece together a plausible and very human scenario. The director, Bill Osco, was a known quantity in the world of adult and exploitation films. He wasn't a mainstream Hollywood player, but he understood how to make films that got attention, often by pushing societal comfort levels. When approaching a young, relatively inexperienced talent like DeBell, the pitch was likely carefully calibrated. It probably wasn't, "Hey, want to star in a porno musical?" More likely it was framed as a hilarious, satirical musical version of Alice in Wonderland, emphasizing the comedy, the songs, the fantasy elements. The X rating itself might have been presented as a bold marketing move, a way to ensure the film stood out in a crowded marketplace, perhaps even as a badge of artistic freedom in that anything goes era. It's not that kind of X-rated film. One can almost hear a persuasive producer coo. It's funny, it's musical, it's Alice. Think about the psychology at play. Kristine DeBell was young. The desire for a breakout role, for recognition, is a powerful intoxicant. The promise of playing a character as iconic as Alice, even in a risque adaptation, would have been incredibly tempting. It's a lead role in a musical based on a classic. How many aspiring actresses get that kind of shot right out of the gate? There's also the foot-in-the-door mentality. Take the role, get noticed, and then leverage that into more mainstream work. It's a gamble many have taken with varying degrees of success. And what about naivete? It's easy to be cynical, but a young person, not yet jaded by the industry, might genuinely believe in the artistic merit or the humorous intent pitched to them. They might not fully grasp the long-term implications of an X rating, especially one attached to such a loaded title. Were there financial considerations? Almost certainly. Modeling, while glamorous, isn't always a steady paycheck, and a film contract, even for a low-budget indie, offers a degree of financial security, however temporary. This isn't to say she was desperate, but financial pragmatism often plays a role in early career choices. Then there's the on-set experience. Whatever was discussed beforehand, the reality of performing nude or in simulated sexual situations, surrounded by a film crew, even in a supposedly comedic or fantastical context, must have been a stark departure from her modeling work. DeBell herself has hinted in later years that the experience was, at times, uncomfortable, and that perhaps she wasn't fully prepared for the extent of the explicitness or how it would ultimately be portrayed. One common tactic in such productions is the boiled frog syndrome, a gradual escalation of what's asked, making it harder for an actor to draw a line once they're already committed and the cameras are rolling. We just need a little more here. It's for the comedy, trust us. The pressure to be professional, not to be difficult, can be immense, especially for a newcomer. When Alice in Wonderland, an X-rated musical fantasy, was finally released in 1976, it did exactly what Oscar likely intended. It caused a sensation. It was a bona fide cult hit. People were intrigued by the audacious premise, the surprisingly catchy songs, and by Kristine DeBell herself, who possessed an undeniable screen presence and a naive charm that, ironically, made the X-rated content even more jarring for some. But this success was a double-edged sword sharpened to a razor's point. The initial flurry of attention, the notoriety, it must have been a bewildering experience for DeBell. Suddenly, she was known, but she was Alice from the X-rated movie, not Kristine DeBell, talented newcomer. The brand was immediate, and it was potent. The film's financial success for its producers did little to pave a smooth path for its star into the hallowed halls of mainstream Hollywood. For Kristine DeBell, the rabbit hole had led not to a whimsical wonderland of career opportunities, but to a much more complex and far less forgiving landscape. The very film that made her a name was about to become the biggest obstacle to the kind of career she likely envisioned. Hollywood was intrigued, yes, but it was also preparing to pass judgment, and that judgment, as we'll see, would be swift and severe. Hollywood's harsh judgment. So, the X-rated Alice makes its controversial splash. Kristine DeBell is undeniably on Hollywood's radar. But as the initial shockwaves subsided, a chilling reality began to set in for her. The radar she was on wasn't necessarily the rising star frequency. It was more like the handle with extreme caution, or perhaps don't handle at all channel. This is where the dream began to curdle, where the price of Wonderland started to become painfully, irrevocably clear. The most immediate and damaging consequence was typecasting, but this was typecasting with a vengeance. It wasn't just that she might be seen as only suitable for sexy roles. It was that the X itself became a kind of cinematic scarlet letter. Casting directors, producers, and studio executives are by nature risk-averse, especially when it comes to investing millions in a mainstream film. Their thought process, however flawed or unfair, often goes something like this. Sure, she's got talent, she's pretty, but she's that girl from the X-rated Alice. Will audiences accept her as a wholesome romantic lead, as a serious dramatic actress? Will her past create a PR nightmare for our multi-million-dollar family-friendly picture? The answer, more often than not, was a resounding, if unspoken, too risky. It's a brutal illustration of Hollywood's deeply ingrained hypocrisy. This is an industry that has, from its inception, built fortunes on sex appeal, on pushing boundaries, on creating and marketing stars as objects of desire. Yet it maintains a veneer of propriety, a carefully curated public image. And woe betide the actor, particularly the actress, who steps too far outside those unwritten, ever-shifting rules, especially if they do so in a project that isn't sanctioned or controlled by the major studios themselves. They might consume the product in private, or profit from its buzz indirectly, but they will publicly distance themselves and penalize those directly involved if the association is deemed too toxic for the mainstream brand. Kristine DeBell did continue to work, which is a testament to her resilience and perhaps some initial industry curiosity. Her role in the 1979 hit comedy Meatballs, starring Bill Murray, was a significant mainstream credit. It was a fun, ensemble piece, and she was good in it, but it was a supporting role, the pretty girl at the summer camp. It wasn't the kind of part that would erase the Alice stigma. She also landed guest spots on popular TV shows of the era: Barnaby Jones, 8 is Enough, Chips. These were standard gigs for working actors, keeping her visible, but they weren't the star-making vehicles one might have hoped for after such a talked-about debut, however controversial. The lead roles in major studio pictures, the kind that build lasting A-list careers, remained stubbornly out of reach. Then there's the infamous and heartbreaking story of The Main Event, the 1979 romantic comedy starring Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal. DeBell was cast in what was reportedly a substantial supporting role, a potential breakthrough into A-list Hollywood. Imagine the hope, the excitement. This was a Warner Brothers picture, A-list stars, a chance to truly showcase her talents in a mainstream, high-profile project. And then the axe fell. Her role was, by all accounts, significantly, even brutally, cut in the final edit, reduced to a mere shadow of what it was meant to be. Why? The official reasons are often vague in such cases: pacing, storyline adjustments. But the whispers, the industry scuttlebutt, strongly suggested that her association with Alice played a major role. Perhaps the studio got cold feet. Perhaps a powerful co-star or producer expressed concerns. Whatever the specific backstage machinations, the message to DeBell must have been devastatingly clear. Your past is still very much your present, and it's holding you back. It's one thing to not get the part. It's another to get it, do the work, and then have it virtually erased. That's a special kind of Hollywood cruelty. Can you imagine the psychological toll? The constant battle against a preconceived notion. Walking into auditions knowing that what likely precedes you is not your resume of diverse roles, but the specter of an X-rated musical. The frustration of seeing lesser talents perhaps get opportunities denied to you because their past was cleaner. The gnawing self-doubt, is it me or is it just Alice? And the anger, the quiet rage at an industry that seemed to hold all the cards and deal them from a stacked deck. It's a heavy burden for any performer to carry. It's also worth noting the persistent double standard. Male actors who appeared in risque or even explicitly adult films early in their careers often seem to weather the storm better. They're best framed as youthful indiscretions or even badges of a certain roguish charm once they achieved mainstream success. For women, however, the stain often proved far more indelible, the path to redemption much steeper, if available at all. Hollywood, for all its progressive posturing, has often been far quicker to forgive its prodigal sons than its fallen daughters. Kristine DeBell's story from this period isn't one of outright failure. She worked. But it's a story of potential curtailed, of doors quietly but firmly shut, of a career constantly swimming upstream against a powerful current of industry prejudice. The X hadn't just labeled a film, it had in many ways branded an actress, limiting her trajectory in ways that were both profound and profoundly unfair. The price of Wonderland was being exacted installment by installment in missed opportunities and diminished roles. Looking back at Kristine DeBell. So years, then decades roll by. The initial furor over Alice in Wonderland, an X-rated musical fantasy, fades into the annals of cult film history. What becomes of Kristine DeBell, the actress at the heart of it all? And how does her story and the film itself resonate today when we unveil the layers? Kristine DeBell, from what public information is available, demonstrated a quiet resilience. She continued to act, albeit not in the spotlight she might once have hoped for. Her filmography extends through the 1980s and 90s, with roles in a variety of genres, often in independent or lower-budget productions, and even some appearances. Into the 2000s, she didn't just vanish. She also reportedly pursued other interests and ventures outside of the fickle world of acting, building a life beyond the shadow of her most famous or infamous role. In the rare, more recent interviews or commentaries she's offered, there's a sense of philosophical acceptance, perhaps a touch of weariness, but notably, a lack of overt public bitterness. She seems to have made peace, in her own way, with the unconventional path her career took. This in itself is a form of strength, a refusal to be solely defined by one early, highly publicized chapter. And what of Alice in Wonderland, an X-rated musical fantasy itself? Time has a funny way of softening edges and recontextualizing art, or at least entertainment. Today, the film is firmly entrenched as a cult classic. For some, it remains an outrageous piece of 70s kitsch, a relic of a bygone era of sexual freedom and cinematic audacity. For others, there's a genuine affection for it. They point to Bill Osco's surprisingly whimsical direction, the undeniably catchy and well-produced musical numbers, and almost universally to Kristine DeBell's luminous and surprisingly innocent performance. Her charm, her wide-eyed engagement with the bizarre proceedings, is often cited as the very thing that makes the film work, on its own strange terms. It elevates it, some argue, from mere exploitation to something more. A guilty pleasure, perhaps? A bizarrely endearing one? For many, yes. It's a film that, love it or loathe it, refuses to be forgotten. A testament to its unique, if controversial, impact. But Kristine DeBell's story transcends the fate of a single cult film. It serves as a potent, almost archetypal Hollywood and cautionary tale, particularly for young women entering the industry. It starkly illustrates the seductive allure of a breakout role, the pressures to conform or to dare, and the often disproportionate life-altering consequences of choices made under those pressures. Her experience painfully unveils the razor-thin line between fame and notoriety. She achieved notoriety in spades, but the sustainable, respectable fame that allows for growth and diverse opportunities proved far more elusive. Her narrative forces us to confront the uncomfortable hypocrisy that can exist within Hollywood. An industry that often sells fantasy and desire on a grand scale can simultaneously punish those who embody those elements too explicitly or outside carefully controlled parameters. It's a system that can build you up with one hand and tear you down with the other, often based on arbitrary and shifting moral codes. The unveiled truth here is that perception in Hollywood often trumps reality, and once a perception is set, it can be incredibly difficult to change. What lessons can be drawn? Perhaps it's about the importance of agency, of truly understanding the nature of the projects one undertakes. Perhaps it's a commentary on the need for better mentorship and protection for young talents navigating treacherous industry waters. Or perhaps it's a more somber reflection on the enduring power of societal judgment, even within an industry that often prides itself on being progressive and open-minded. Kristine DeBell's journey is a complex tapestry woven with threads of ambition, talent, questionable choices, industry exploitation, and personal resilience. It's not a simple story of victimhood, nor is it a straightforward tale of rebellious triumph. It's something far more nuanced, and therefore far more human and compelling. The Wonderland she entered was indeed full of strange wonders, but also unforeseen perils, and its legacy continues to provoke thought and debate. So, As we emerge from this particularly curious Hollywood rabbit hole and the dust of decades settles around the story of Kristine DeBell and her X-rated Alice, what enduring truths have been unveiled? What echoes from her past resonate with us today? It's abundantly clear that Kristine DeBell's decision to star in that infamous musical wasn't a simple act of free will in a vacuum. It was profoundly shaped by the zeitgeist of the 1970s, that intoxicating, confusing era of porn chic, where boundaries were not just being pushed, but obliterated. Add to that the potent cocktail of youthful ambition, the understandable hunger for a breakthrough role, and perhaps a critical lack of seasoned guidance in navigating the industry's more shadowy corners. She stepped into a moment, and that moment, for better or worse, defined much of what followed. The consequence, as we've meticulously unraveled, was a career undeniably altered, if not curtailed, by Hollywood's harsh and often hypocritical judgment. The X of the rating became a brand seared onto her professional identity, effectively closing doors that her talent might otherwise have opened. This starkly unveils one of Hollywood's most unsettling characteristics, its capacity to exploit and sensationalize on one hand, while simultaneously punishing and ostracizing those who become too closely associated with the very sensations it profits from. It's a system that can create dazzling myths overnight and just as easily confine real people within them. But to reduce Kristine DeBell's story to mere victimhood would be a disservice to her resilience. It's more than just a chronicle of a controversial film and its career repercussions. It's a multi-layered human drama played out against the backdrop of an industry renowned for its artifice and its ruthlessness. It forces us to look at the complex interplay of artistic expression, commercial imperatives, societal double standards, and the enduring weight of individual choices within a system that often seems rigged. It unveils the stark reality that in the unforgiving landscape of Hollywood, particularly for women, the chasm between being seen as daringly provocative and dangerously spoiled goods can be treacherously narrow, and the fall can be precipitous. Her journey is an echo, a poignant reminder that resonates even now in an age of instant internet fame and equally instant cancellation. It speaks to the vulnerability of young talent, the intoxicating allure of the spotlight, and the often hidden, heavy price tags attached to the glittering dreams Hollywood so expertly sells. It compels us to ask uncomfortable questions. Who truly holds the power to define what is acceptable art versus mere exploitation? How much agency does a young performer really have when faced with persuasive producers and the promise of stardom? And has Hollywood truly evolved beyond these dynamics, or do similar pressures and hypocrisies simply manifest in new forms today? Kristine DeBell's Alice may have been a fantasy, but the lessons from her journey are very real. They reveal a Hollywood that is as much about crushing dreams as it is about making them come true, a place where innocence can be a commodity and where the path to stardom is littered with as many cautionary tales as success stories. What are your reflections on Kristine DeBell's story? Does it change how you view the golden age of 70s cinema or the cult film phenomenon? And more broadly, who do you think are the modern equivalents, the talents navigating similar high-wire acts in today's hyper-scrutinized entertainment world? Share your insights and opinions in the comments below. We genuinely want to hear what you think. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on Hollywood Unveiled. If this exploration has given you food for thought, please show your support with a like and be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell. You won't want to miss our next journey as we continue to pull back the velvet curtain on the captivating and often confounding secrets of Tinseltown. Until then, keep questioning, keep watching, and keep unveiling.